By far, one of the questions that players ask you the most is how they can become a better one-on-one player. And this video is going to help you a ton if you have that same question. Whether it's playing one-on-one at the park or at the gym against your friends, or if it's actually becoming a dominant one-on-one player in real games, there are a couple important keys that you need to know if you want to make yourself an elite one-on-one player. And make sure you stay until the end of the video because we're going to go through both of the categories you need to be elite at if you want to be a great one-on-one player. And the best thing is you don't need to be some sort of freak athlete to be able to do this. Let's get into it. Now, here's the one concept I need you to understand and I need you to remember for the rest of the video. Either you have to move fast or the defender needs to move first. Now, you'll see what that means as we progress through the video, but just try and keep that in mind. So let's talk about the first category of one-on-one or isolation, and the category that's probably the most popular, which is off the dribble. So you have to remember that scoring points is all about creating advantages. And the better you are at consistently creating these advantages and then exploiting them, the better you're going to be in one-on-one situations. So let's talk about one of the simplest ways to do this, and that's using lateral movement. What lateral movement does is it forces that defender to make a decision. Either they move to cut you off in the direction that you floated towards, and that's often going to open up the other direction for you to drive. Sometimes they won't move, and that's going to give you the ability to push off and go towards that direction you move towards. And then sometimes they just back up, which might give you that opportunity to shoot the open shot. In this clip, Luka uses that float to create lateral movement, which not only gets his defender to shift, but also to create a top foot, meaning that when Luka attacks towards that right direction, the defender's going to have to open up their hips, essentially giving Luka a lane to drive to the basket. Here we've got the same concept from Brandon Miller. That float gets the defender to load up and shift, and then Brandon goes the opposite direction. Now, sometimes the defender doesn't do a good enough job of cutting off that lateral movement, so you can just load up and go. What is another great thing about the float is it puts you in a great position to accelerate. So as you see in these clips right here, the defender doesn't cut it off, so they're able to just drive the direction that they're floating towards. And if you really capitalize on this a couple of times, eventually they may just back up and give you space to shoot the shot. Now, you also have more than just the float as an option to create lateral movement. You can also do something as simple as just sell a drive to a certain direction, which will get them to react, and then you can go the opposite way. Right here, Trae Young uses his feet to sell a drive to the right before crossing himself back over to the left. And we can see how effective this is at shifting Marcus Smart laterally, which gives him a lane to be able to drive. This specific type of footwork is called a drop cross. Make sure you click the top link in my description below to get my free program, which goes through how to be able to do this. Here we see Luka do a very similar thing where he sets up that drive to his left before he push crosses back to his right and gets downhill. Now, the concept I mentioned earlier about making them move first, this is where we can really see it because that footwork can force them to move, which is then going to give you the opportunity to exploit the direction that they give up. It's a super simple concept if you want to create more opportunities for yourself one-on-one. Get lateral and then see what happens. Sometimes even just a look towards one side or the other is enough to get that defender to overplay that way, as we see in this clip here. Now, there's examples of getting them to move first. Let's talk about us moving fast as a way to create an advantage. As the offensive player, you inherently have a leg up because you're the one who decides what to do, so you're always a split second ahead. So we can utilize that by going from slow to fast and catching them off guard. This is especially effective in a matchup where you might be a little bit quicker than the guy guarding you, but even if you aren't, if you're good enough at doing this, you can still create an advantage for yourself. Right here we see Shea get into what's called a delay between, which basically just means that he lets the ball get between his legs to the other hand before he actually drops into an explosive position so that he can drive. And this will many times catch that defender off guard and give you a little bit of a head start. Here we see that same concept get into that delay, which allows him to catch Fred VanVleet a little bit off guard and get himself to the paint. And you don't always need the delay either. Sometimes just going from super relaxed and acting like you're not a threat to immediately getting explosive and getting downhill is enough to catch that defender and get where you want to go. Now, this also isn't limited to just being useful with a between or some sort of move. Just going from dribbling relaxed, not being a threat, to then exploding forward and going can a lot of times get you that advantage that you need to get past that defender. Now let's talk a crucial area of winning these ISO matchups, and that's being able to stop and change directions. Right here, Luka attacks the defender's top foot, which forces him to open up, and then he immediately stops with an inverted drag and changes direction, which gives him a wide open lane to the basket. An inverted drag just means that he stops on that inside step, but that's another way to create lateral movement with that defender, is to change direction, which right here leads to a foul. And here we see the same concept against PJ Tucker right here. Luka gets that inverted drag to change direction and exploit that defender, giving him that way. Another great stop option is the snatch, which you see with Kyrie right here, which allows him to stop, change directions, and get to the rim. This is something we work on heavy inside of my free program, so again, click that top link below to check that out. Now, the second aspect of ISO or one-on-one, an area that I think is probably even more important, is being able to score off the catch in these situations. Great scorers are able to do their work efficiently and are able to score without needing a ton of dribbles. So this might mean using a rip through or a jab or some sort of jab option to be able to create an advantage for yourself and get downhill. Here we see Kyrie use that jab to create that lateral movement with his defender, which opens up a lane for him to drive towards his left. Every single player needs to be able to utilize a jab effectively. It's the simplest, but probably the most effective move you can use to win more one-on-one matchups. And here we see the same thing from Chris Middleton. That jab gets that defender to move laterally to that right, opening up the opportunity to get to the left to his pull-up. And much like with the float, if that defender bites on the jab or gives you space to avoid getting blown by, then it gives you space to be able to go up into that shot. There's also a lot of counters using the jab. One of them is the shimmy jab or the rocker step, which we see with Brandon Miller right here. This is one of my favorites to really freeze that defender and allow you to get a step on them to get by them in an isolation situation. And where it all stems from off the catch is just a simple rip through. By you being able to get to that rip through, it's going to set up that jab much more effectively for you. So understand that option A, attack on that rip through. Option B, get to that jab and go the other direction after they've shifted. Another great option off the catch is utilizing what's called a negative step. And this is pretty much just where you use that free foot to load up so that you can drive towards that pivot foot. And this essentially allows you to push off with 2 feet on your drive, which just gives you an added advantage when it comes to moving faster than that defender does. So what are the steps that you should take if you want to become a better ISO player, be able to score more in these situations, both off the catch and off the dribble? There's 2 steps that I think are really important. First thing is that it's so important to understand the concepts that we've talked about in the video. So maybe go back and rewatch some of the stuff that you found important. But then once you start to have a grasp on it, I think a really powerful thing you can do is start to watch highlights of players and see when they utilize these different concepts. So do you see someone use lateral movement to exploit a defender? How do they do that? Is it with some sort of dribble? Is it with a jab or some sort of footwork? The human brain has an incredible ability to recognize patterns and also the ability to repeat what it sees and understands. So the more that you watch, the more that you understand these concepts, the easier it's going to be for you to do the same stuff when you play. And the second thing that's critically important for you to do if you want to become an elite one-on-one player is play as much one-on-one as you possibly can. Find players who are better than you if you can, and play against them as much as possible. Try out these different things, see what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and you're gonna start to make massive leaps in this area. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like and subscribe, and click the top link in my description below to get my free Elite Perimeter Scorer program. I'll talk to you guys soon. Peace.